In the cold, sterile halls of Manhattan General, where life and death dance on a razor's edge, one woman's fall would change everything. Katherine Kizoba never asked for anything. Not sympathy, not help, certainly not love. She came to America with dreams stitched together by hope and held up by sheer willpower. But when exhaustion finally claims her, collapsing her to the hospital floor, it's the city's most untouchable billionaire who catches her. Gerald Hastings built walls around his heart the day he buried his wife, swearing never to feel again. Yet something about the compassionate nurse who gives everything and asks for nothing begins to crack those walls. In a world where money can buy everything except what matters most, can two broken souls find healing in each other? Or will the forces determined to keep them apart succeed? This is a story about second chances, impossible love, and the courage it takes to risk your heart one more time. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens next. The overhead fluorescent lights blurred into ribbons of white as Katherine's vision tunneled. Her legs wobbled beneath her, suddenly made of water instead of bone and muscle. The medication cart she'd been pushing crashed sideways, pills scattering across the polished hospital floor like tiny desperate prayers. Someone screamed her name, but the sound came from underwater, distorted and far away. Katherine reached for the wall, her fingers scraping against nothing but air. The world tilted violently to the left, and then she was falling, the ground rushing up to meet her face. She braced for impact, for the sharp crack of skull against linoleum, but it never came. Instead, she felt arms, strong, certain, impossibly solid, wrap around her body, catching her mid-collapse. The arms lifted her effortlessly, cradling her against a chest that smelled of expensive cologne and something else, something warm and inexplicably safe. Through the fog of consciousness slipping away, she registered a voice, deep and commanding, cutting through the chaos around them. Someone get a gurney now. Call Dr. Morrison. Move. Katherine tried to open her eyes, tried to see who held her, but her eyelids weighed 1,000 pounds each. All she could manage was a flutter, a brief glimpse of a strong jawline and eyes that looked almost frightened before darkness swallowed her whole. Gerald Hastings had been reviewing construction proposals on the 5th floor when he heard the commotion. He'd told himself he was at the hospital late because of the board meeting scheduled for the following morning, that his presence had nothing to do with the possibility of seeing a certain nurse with kind eyes and an exhausted smile. He'd been lying to himself for 3 weeks now. Ever since the night he'd watched her comfort a dying man's daughter with such genuine compassion, it had physically hurt him to witness. When he'd rounded the corner and seen her falling, something primal had taken over. He'd moved without thinking, his body acting on instinct he didn't know he still possessed. Now, carrying her limp form through the emergency department doors, he felt his heart hammering against his ribs in a way it hadn't in 5 years. Not since Claire died. Not since he'd promised himself he'd never care about anyone that deeply again. Mr. Hastings, we'll take her from here, a young resident said, rushing forward with a gurney. Gerald's arms tightened involuntarily around Katherine. Which room? Sir, we can handle this. You don't need to. Which room? His voice came out harder than intended, brooking no argument. The resident swallowed. Trauma Bay 3. Gerald laid Katherine on the gurney himself, his hands lingering a moment too long as nurses swarmed around her, checking vitals, starting IVs, calling out numbers he barely registered. Her face looked pale under the harsh lights, her natural brown skin tone washed out by exhaustion. Dark circles shadowed her closed eyes, and he noticed, really noticed for the first time, how thin she'd become. How much weight had she lost? When had she last eaten a proper meal? BP's 80/50. Heart rate 120. She's severely dehydrated, and her glucose is 42. Get fluids running wide open and push D50. Someone find her file. I want to know when she last had a day off. Gerald stood at the edge of the organized chaos, feeling utterly useless. He was Gerald Hastings. He controlled boardrooms, commanded empires, made decisions that affected thousands of lives with a signature. But here, watching Katherine's chest rise and fall in shallow breaths, he couldn't do a damn thing. Dr. Morrison arrived, his expression grim as he reviewed the vitals. How long has she been working? She's been here since 6 this morning, one of the other nurses answered quietly. But she also worked the night shift yesterday. And the day before that. I think she's done 7 doubles this week. 7. Dr. Morrison's voice rose. Why the hell wasn't this flagged? Silence answered him. Gerald knew why. Nurses were chronically short-staffed. Katherine probably volunteered for every shift she could get. He'd seen her personnel file once, noticed the small paychecks she sent internationally every month, the student loan payments that consumed most of her salary. She was working herself to death, and no one had stopped her because the hospital needed her too badly. His jaw clenched. That was going to change. She's stabilizing, Dr. Morrison announced after 15 minutes that felt like hours. We'll keep her overnight for observation, run some tests. She needs rest and proper nutrition. I'm ordering a mandatory 2-week leave. Make it 4, Gerald said. Every head turned toward him. Mr. Hastings, Dr. Morrison began carefully. While I appreciate your concern, staffing decisions. 4 weeks, full pay, non-negotiable. And I want a full investigation into how we let one of our nurses work herself into collapse. This doesn't happen again, not at my hospital. Technically, it's not your hospital, sir. You're the board chairman. But Gerald's stare could have frozen fire. 4 weeks. Full pay. Am I clear? Crystal, sir. As the medical team finished stabilizing Katherine and prepared to move her to a private room, Gerald finally stepped back. His hands were shaking slightly, and he curled them into fists, willing the tremor away. What the hell was wrong with him? He barely knew this woman. Yes, she'd caught his attention with her kindness. Yes, he'd found excuses to visit the hospital more frequently than board duties required. But this reaction, this overwhelming need to protect her, to ensure she was okay, this was dangerous territory. This was feeling something again. He turned to leave, to retreat to the safety of his empty penthouse and the emotional walls he'd so carefully constructed, but her voice stopped him. Wait. Gerald spun around. Katherine's eyes were open, dark and disoriented but aware. She tried to sit up, and a nurse gently pushed her back down. Easy, Katherine. You collapsed. You need to rest. I'm fine. I just need. She stopped, her gaze finding Gerald's across the room. Recognition flickered, followed by confusion, then embarrassment. Oh God. Did you carry me? He moved closer before he could stop himself, his feet betraying his brain's command to keep distance. You fell. I caught you. I'm so sorry. That's so embarrassing. I don't know what happened. I was fine and then. You worked 7 double shifts this week. Katherine's mouth closed. She looked away, color rising in her cheeks. I needed the hours. You need to not die. I wasn't dying. I was just tired. Your blood pressure was 80/50. Your blood sugar was 42. You were severely dehydrated. Those aren't symptoms of being just tired, Ms. Kazoba. Those are symptoms of someone who's been systematically destroying their health. She flinched at his tone, and Gerald immediately regretted his harshness. He wasn't angry at her. He was angry at himself for not seeing it sooner, for not intervening before it came to this. Look, Katherine said softly, I appreciate your concern, Mr. Hastings, but I'll be fine. I'll take a day off, get some rest, and be back tomorrow. We're short-staffed and you're on mandatory leave. For weeks. Her eyes widened. What? No. I can't afford. Full pay. That's not. You can't just. She struggled to sit up again, frustration and panic warring in her expression. Mr. Hastings, I appreciate what you did, catching me and bringing me here, but you don't understand. I have bills. I have people depending on me. I can't take 4 weeks off. I can't. The desperation in her voice cut through him. Gerald pulled a chair close to her bedside and sat, bringing himself to eye level with her. This close, he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, the fullness of her lips even pressed thin with stress, the elegant line of her neck. He forced himself to focus. Tell me, he said simply. Tell you what? Why you're killing yourself. Why you need the money so badly you're willing to work yourself into the ground. Tell me. Katherine studied him, wariness evident in every line of her body. Why do you care? It was a fair question. Gerald didn't have a good answer, at least not one he was ready to admit. Because nobody else seems to be asking. Something in her expression softened. She looked down at her hands, at the 4 taped to her left arm, and sighed. My father died when I was 16. Heart attack, sudden. My mother raised me and my 3 younger siblings alone back in Nigeria. She cleaned houses, sold food in the market, did whatever she could to survive. When I got my nursing license, I promised her I'd come to America, make good money, send it home so my siblings could finish school, so my mother could finally rest. Gerald listened without interrupting, watching emotions play across her face. Love, guilt, determination, exhaustion. My youngest brother wants to be an engineer. My sisters want to study business and education. They're smart, Mr. Hastings, so smart, and they deserve chances. But chances cost money. School fees, books, living expenses, it all adds up. And I still have my own student loans from nursing school here. The debt, it's suffocating sometimes. So yes, I work doubles. I work triples when I can. Because every extra shift means another month of school fees paid, another step toward my siblings' dreams. That's why I can't take 4 weeks off. That's why I need to get back to work. Silence settled between them, heavy with understanding. Gerald recognized the weight she carried because he'd carried similar burdens once, before money stopped being a concern and became just numbers and accounts. He remembered working 3 jobs through college after his father's business failed, remembered the terror of choosing between rent and food, remembered the crushing responsibility of being the one everyone depended on. Your family is lucky to have you, he said finally. Katherine's laugh came out bitter. They'd be luckier if I didn't pass out in hospital hallways. That's not your fault. The system failed you. I failed you. You? You didn't even know me until tonight. I'm the board chairman. Every person who works in this hospital is my responsibility. I should have seen this coming. I should have better protocols in place to prevent exactly this situation. That's on me. He leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. So let me make it right. For weeks, full pay. And when you come back, we're restructuring scheduling so no one can work more than 3 doubles in a month. Maximum. Mr. Hastings. Gerald. She blinked. What? Call me Gerald. We're past formalities now, don't you think? A small smile tugged at her lips despite everything. That's not very professional. Neither is carrying someone through the emergency department, but here we are. The smile grew slightly. Fair point. But I still can't accept special treatment. The other nurses will. The other nurses will benefit from the same new policies. You're not getting special treatment. You're just the catalyst for changes that should have been implemented years ago. He stood, suddenly aware he'd been sitting at her bedside for over 30 minutes, that nurses were stealing glances through the window, that rumors would be circulating by morning. He should care about that. Strangely, he didn't. Rest, Katherine. Doctor's orders. And mine. I don't take orders from billionaires. Good thing I'm asking then. He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at her. She looked smaller in the hospital bed, vulnerable in a way that made his chest ache. For what it's worth, your family isn't lucky to have you. They're blessed. There's a difference. He left before she could respond, before he could see whether his words had landed the way he intended. Outside the room, Dr. Morrison was waiting, his expression knowing in a way that made Gerald uncomfortable. That was kind of you, the doctor said. It was necessary. Was it? Dr. Morrison fell into step beside Gerald as they walked toward the elevators. Because mandatory paid leave, restructuring hospital-wide scheduling policies, personally sitting at a nurse's bedside for half an hour. That all seems a bit above and beyond necessary, even for you. Gerald jabbed the elevator button harder than needed. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating an observation. You've been coming to the hospital more frequently these past few weeks. Always late evening. Always finding reasons to walk through the cardiac ward where Katherine works. And now this. I'm just wondering if you've asked yourself why. The elevator doors opened. Gerald stepped inside, then turned to face Dr. Morrison with his most neutral expression. She's an employee who needed help. That's all. If you say so. The doctor smiled slightly. But Gerald, for what it's worth, it's okay to let yourself care again. Claire wouldn't have wanted you to shut down forever. The doors closed before Gerald could formulate a response. He leaned against the elevator wall, his reflection staring back at him from the polished metal. Dr. Morrison was wrong. This wasn't about caring. It couldn't be. Caring led to attachment. Attachment led to love, and love led to devastating loss. He'd survived losing Claire, barely. He wouldn't put himself through that again. Katherine was just an employee, a good person who deserved help. Nothing more. He repeated that to himself all the way home. He was still repeating it 3 days later when he found himself reviewing her medical files in his home office at 2 in the morning, noting with satisfaction that her levels had stabilized, that she'd been discharged with strict orders to rest. He told himself his interest was purely professional, that any board chairman would monitor the health of an employee who'd collapsed on hospital grounds. He didn't examine why he'd memorized her smile, or why he kept replaying the moment when she'd woken up and looked at him with those warm, confused eyes. He didn't admit that for the first time in 5 years, he'd felt something other than numbness. He especially didn't acknowledge that he was counting down the days until she returned to work, not because of scheduling concerns, but because the hospital felt emptier without her presence. Gerald Hastings was many things: a brilliant businessman, a ruthless negotiator, a man who'd built an empire from calculated risks and strategic moves. But he'd never been good at lying to himself. And the truth, the terrifying truth he couldn't quite suppress, was that Katherine Kizoba had cracked something open inside him the night she fell. The question was what he planned to do about it. Katherine stared at her bank account balance on her phone screen, checking it for the third time to make sure she hadn't imagined it. The deposit was there, exactly as promised: 4 weeks of full salary, paid in advance. She set the phone down on her kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly. She'd never had this much money at once in her entire life. The tiny studio apartment she rented in Queens suddenly felt different, less suffocating. She could pay 3 months of rent in advance. She could send money home without the accompanying panic of whether she'd make next month's bills. She could buy groceries without calculating every item's price. For 4 weeks, she could breathe. If you're enjoying this emotional roller coaster, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Trust me, this is just the beginning. The relief was overwhelming. Katherine put her head in her hands and cried, letting out weeks of accumulated stress in huge, gasping sobs. She cried for her exhaustion, for her father who'd never see her success, for her mother who worked too hard back home, for herself and the crushing weight she carried daily. She cried until she had no tears left, until she felt emptied out and strangely lighter. When she finally lifted her head, her phone was ringing. Unknown number. Hello, Ms. Kizoba? This is Patricia Greenwood from Manhattan General Hospital's Employee Wellness Program. I'm calling to schedule your mandatory consultation sessions as part of your medical leave. Katherine frowned. Consultation sessions? Yes, Mr. Hastings specifically requested comprehensive wellness support during your recovery period. We have you scheduled with Dr. Reeves, our staff psychologist, for tomorrow at 2 p.m., and I'll be coordinating with a nutritionist and a financial wellness counselor as well. All sessions are confidential and fully covered, of course. Mr. Hastings requested this? He was quite insistent. He's implemented new protocols for all staff who work excessive overtime. You're the first to receive the full support package, but it will be offered hospital-wide moving forward. After hanging up, Katherine sat with this information, unsure how to feel. Part of her bristled at the presumption. She didn't need a psychologist or a financial counselor. She was managing fine. Well, fine except for the collapsing part, and the not eating properly part, and the panic attacks she'd been having at 3 a.m. when she calculated bills. Maybe she wasn't managing as well as she thought. The other part of her, the part she tried to suppress, felt something dangerously close to gratitude. And not just gratitude, something warmer, something that had taken root during those few minutes when Gerald Hastings had looked at her with genuine concern, when he'd listened to her story without judgment, when he'd seen her exhaustion and decided to do something about it. She barely knew the man. She'd seen him around the hospital occasionally over the past few weeks, always impeccably dressed, always projecting an aura of untouchable authority. She'd heard the stories, the tragic widower who'd inherited a fortune and built it into an empire, the ruthless businessman who showed no mercy in boardrooms, the recluse who attended charity galas out of obligation but never stayed long enough to enjoy them. She'd also noticed things the stories didn't mention. The way he paused to thank cleaning staff by name. The time she'd seen him sitting alone in the hospital chapel at midnight, his shoulders curved in grief. The substantial anonymous donations that kept the children's ward funded even during budget cuts. Everyone assumed the donations came from various benefactors, but Katherine had been filing paperwork one day and seen his signature on the forms. Gerald Hastings was more than his reputation suggested, and that made him dangerous to her carefully constructed emotional walls. The next day, Katherine arrived at Dr. Reeves' office 10 minutes early, nervous for reasons she couldn't articulate. The psychologist turned out to be a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "So," Dr. Reeves said after the initial pleasantries, "tell me about the collapse." "It was just overwork. Not a big deal. 7 double shifts in 1 week seems like a big deal to me." Katherine shrugged. "I needed the money. And that need was more important than your health. My family depends on me. If I don't work, they don't eat. So yes, their needs are more important than my exhaustion." Dr. Reeves made a note. "That's quite a burden to carry alone. Do you have support here? Friends, a partner, anyone you talk to about this stress?" Katherine thought about it. "Not really. I don't have time for socializing. My ex-boyfriend Derek didn't understand why I worked so much. He thought I was making excuses to avoid him. We broke up 4 months ago. And you haven't dated since?" "I haven't slept since. Dating seems like a luxury I can't afford." They talked for the full hour, Dr. Reeves gently probing areas Katherine had long avoided examining too closely. Her guilt about leaving Nigeria, her fear of failing her family, her tendency to measure her self-worth entirely by her usefulness to others. By the end, Katherine felt raw and exposed, but also oddly relieved. "I'm diagnosing you with burnout and compassion fatigue," Dr. Reeves said. "Common among healthcare workers, especially those carrying significant external pressures. We'll work on coping strategies. But Katherine, you need to understand something crucial. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. If you destroy your health, you can't help anyone." Katherine nodded, intellectually understanding but emotionally struggling to accept it. Self-care felt like giving up, like admitting she couldn't handle what she'd set out to do. She was leaving the office, lost in thought, when she literally walked into someone coming around the corner. Strong hands steadied her shoulders. "Sorry, I wasn't watching where." "Oh." Gerald Hastings looked equally surprised to see her. He was dressed more casually than usual, dark jeans and a black sweater that made him look younger, more approachable. Also more attractive, a detail Katherine's brain registered before she could stop it. "Katherine, what are you doing here?" She gestured vaguely behind her. "Mandatory consultation. You're doing, I hear." He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Rested. Still getting used to having free time." She studied him. "What are you doing here?" "This is the therapy wing. I didn't think board chairman made house calls. I'm meeting someone for lunch. My godfather's practice is upstairs." They stood in the hallway, an awkward silence stretching between them. Katherine noticed details she'd missed during their previous encounter. The faint scar along his jawline, the gray threading through his dark hair at the temples, the weariness in his eyes that probably mirrored her own. Gerald Hastings looked like a man who didn't sleep well either. "Listen," he said finally, "I know the whole therapy thing was presumptuous. If you're uncomfortable with it, I can." "It's helpful," she interrupted. "Surprisingly helpful. So thank you. For that, and for the leave, and for the pay, and for, well, everything. You didn't have to do any of it." "Yes, I did." "Why?" The question hung between them. Gerald opened his mouth, closed it, looked away. When he met her eyes again, something vulnerable flickered across his face before his usual controlled expression slid back into place. "Because you remind me that good people still exist," he said quietly. "And good people shouldn't be punished for their goodness." Before Katherine could respond, a voice called down the hallway. "Gerald, there you are. I've been waiting." "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were with someone." A stunning woman approached, her designer dress and perfect hair screaming money and privilege. Katherine recognized her, Dr. Selena Park, one of the senior cardiologists, brilliant and intimidatingly beautiful. She looked at Katherine with barely concealed curiosity, her gaze traveling from Katherine's worn jeans to her simple t-shirt. "Dr. Park," Gerald said, his tone cooling several degrees. "This is Katherine Kazoba, one of our nurses." "Katherine, Dr. Selena Park." "We've met," Selena said, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You work in cardiac, don't you? I heard about your collapse. Such a shame. You really must take better care of yourself." The concern sounded genuine, but something underneath it felt sharp, assessing. Katherine forced a polite smile. "I'm working on it." "Well, Gerald certainly seems invested in your recovery. How fortunate for you." Selena linked her arm through Gerald's possessively. "Shall we go to lunch? We have so much to discuss about the new wing." Gerald gently but firmly extracted his arm from her grip. Actually, I should make sure Katherine gets home safely. She's still recovering, and I'm fine, Katherine said quickly, feeling suddenly out of place. Really? I drove here. I was just leaving anyway. You two have lunch. It was nice seeing you again, Mr. Hastings. She walked away before either could respond, feeling Selena's calculating gaze burning into her back. Once outside, Katherine leaned against her car and let out a long breath. What the hell was that? That awkward, charged moment with Gerald, the way her heart had stuttered when he'd looked at her, the unexpected jealousy when Selena had touched his arm. No, absolutely not. She was not developing feelings for Gerald Hastings. He was a billionaire. She was a nurse drowning in debt. He was a widower still clearly grieving his lost wife. She was a woman with a family depending on her, with no time or energy for romance. It didn't matter that he'd carried her when she fell. It didn't matter that he'd listened to her story without judgment. It didn't matter that sometimes, when he looked at her, she felt seen in a way she'd never experienced before. None of it mattered because nothing could come of it. Katherine got in her car and drove home, repeating that truth like a mantra. She was still repeating it when she went to sleep that night, and when she woke up thinking about the way Gerald's hands had felt on her shoulders, steady and warm. She was completely, utterly, dangerously starting to care about a man who was entirely wrong for her, in every possible way. And the terrifying part was that she suspected he might be starting to care back. 3 weeks into her mandatory leave, Katherine was going stir-crazy. She'd attended all her sessions with Dr. Reeves, met with the nutritionist who'd created a meal plan she could actually afford and maintain, even consulted with the financial counselor who'd helped her create a budget that didn't require 70-hour work weeks. She felt healthier, more rested, and almost comfortable in her own skin for the first time in years. She was also bored out of her mind, which was why, when her phone rang with a call from Manhattan General, she answered on the first ring, hoping for any kind of distraction. Katherine, it's Martha from scheduling. Listen, I know you're on leave, but we have a situation. Remember Mrs. Chun from room 412? The elderly woman with congestive heart failure you were so wonderful with. Of course. Is she okay? She's scheduled for a major procedure tomorrow, and she's refusing to go through with it. She keeps asking for you specifically. Says you're the only one who listens. I know it's your day off, but is there any chance you could come in and talk to her? Just for a few minutes. Katherine didn't hesitate. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Mrs. Chin's room was filled with flowers and cards from what appeared to be a large, loving family. The tiny Chinese woman sat propped up in bed, her expression stubborn despite the tubes and monitors surrounding her. Mrs. Chun, Katherine said gently, pulling a chair close. I hear you're giving everyone trouble. The older woman's face lit up. Katherine, they said you were on vacation. I am. But when I heard you needed me, I came. Now tell me what's going on. Why don't you want the surgery? Mrs. Chin's eyes filled with tears. I'm 83 years old. I've had a good life. My children are grown, successful. My grandchildren are beautiful. Maybe it's time to rest. The surgery, it's risky. I might not wake up. Or worse, I might wake up diminished, a burden. I don't want that for my family. Katherine took the woman's hand. I understand being afraid. Surgery is scary. But Mrs. Chun, do you remember what you told me last month when we were talking about your grandson's wedding? What? You said you wanted to dance at his reception. You said you'd never forgive yourself if you missed it because your heart gave out. The wedding is in 8 weeks. Without this surgery, you won't make it. With the surgery, you have a fighting chance. And Dr. Rodriguez is one of the best. I've seen him perform miracles. But what if I survive the surgery but can't dance? What if I'm too weak? Then you'll sit in the most beautiful chair they have and watch everyone else dance. And your grandson will know his grandmother fought to be there for him. That's not burden, Mrs. Chun. That's love. They talked for another hour, Katherine addressing every fear and concern until Mrs. Chun finally agreed to proceed with the surgery. As Katherine was leaving, she nearly collided with Gerald in the hallway for the second time in 3 weeks. We have to stop meeting like this, he said, a rare smile crossing his face. Are you sneaking back to work during your leave? Someone needed me. I couldn't say no. She gestured back toward Mrs. Chen's room. She was refusing surgery. She needed convincing. And you convinced her. It's what I do. Gerald's expression turned serious. It's what you do brilliantly. I watched you with her family last month. The way you translated complex medical information into terms they could understand. The way you held space for their fears while still giving them hope. That's a gift, Katherine. A rare one. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. I just care about my patients. Exactly. He glanced at his watch. Have you eaten? It's nearly 7. I grabbed coffee this morning. His expression turned disapproving. The nutritionist is going to be disappointed in both of us. Come on, there's a decent Italian place 2 blocks away. Let me buy you dinner. Call it a thank you for coming in on your day off. Katherine knew she should say no. Every instinct screamed that having dinner with Gerald Hastings was a terrible idea. But she was tired of fighting her instincts, tired of always doing what was sensible and safe. Just once, she wanted to say yes to something that made her heart beat faster. Okay, she heard herself say. But I'm paying for myself. Katherine, those are my terms. Take them or leave them. He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his entire face. You're impossibly stubborn, you know that? I've been told. The Italian restaurant was small and intimate, with checkered tablecloths and candles on every table. They were seated in a corner booth, and Katherine tried not to notice how the candlelight made Gerald's eyes look warmer, less guarded. They ordered pasta for her, risotto for him, and for a few minutes, they ate in comfortable silence. Then Gerald set down his fork and looked at her directly. Tell me something true, he said. What? Something true about yourself. Something you don't usually share. I'll trade you. I'll tell you something true about me first. He paused, seeming to gather courage. I come to the hospital late at night because I can't sleep. Haven't slept properly in 5 years, since my wife died. Being at the hospital feels purposeful, productive. Being home alone just feels empty. The confession hit Katherine square in the chest. She set down her own fork, studying him. I send most of my money home because guilt eats me alive when I don't. My siblings are back in Nigeria struggling while I'm in America with opportunities they'll never have. Nothing I do ever feels like enough. I could work 24 hours a day and still feel like I'm failing them. You're not failing them. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because I see how hard you work, how much you sacrifice. If they can't see your love in your actions, that's their limitation, not your failure. Something loosened in Katherine's chest. Your wife, she said softly. What was she like? Gerald's entire demeanor shifted, pain flickering across his features before he controlled it. Claire was like sunshine, optimistic, laughing at everything, believing the best in people even when they disappointed her. She made me better just by existing in my life. When she got sick, she made me promise I wouldn't shut down after she was gone. I promised. And then I immediately broke that promise because I didn't know how to exist in a world without her. And now I'm starting to wonder if maybe I've been existing instead of living for long enough. His eyes met hers, intense and vulnerable. You make me want to try living again. I don't know what to do with that. Katherine's heart hammered against her ribs. Gerald. I know, he said quickly. I know this is complicated. I'm your boss, technically. You're recovering. You have your own life, your own burdens. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that meeting you changed something for me. You cracked something open that I'd convinced myself was permanently sealed. So thank you for that. She should have left it there. Should have thanked him politely, finished dinner, gone home, and maintained professional distance. But Katherine had spent her whole life doing what she should do, and suddenly she was exhausted by it. You scare me, she admitted. The way I feel when I'm around you scares me. I can't afford to care about you. I don't have room in my life for this. And yet every time I see you, I want to make room. That's terrifying. I know the feeling. They stared at each other across the table, the air between them charged with possibility and fear, and something neither was quite ready to name. The restaurant bustled around them, oblivious to the fact that 2 people were silently acknowledging that something significant was beginning, something that could heal them or break them, or maybe both. So what do we do? Katherine asked finally. Gerald reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers, giving her the choice. We start small. Dinner sometimes. Conversations. Honesty. We don't rush. We don't make promises we can't keep. We just see if this thing between us is real, or if it's loneliness and timing playing tricks on both of us. Katherine looked at his outstretched hand, at the vulnerability in his eyes, at the hope he was trying so hard to suppress. She thought about all the reasons this was a bad idea, the power imbalance, their different worlds, her obligations, his grief. She thought about every practical reason to say no. Then she thought about how long it had been since anyone had looked at her the way Gerald looked at her. Not as a utility, not as a caretaker, not as a means to an end, but as a person worth knowing, worth cherishing, worth staying up late talking to in an Italian restaurant that smelled of garlic and possibility. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and certain, and Katherine felt something shift in her chest, like a door she hadn't known was locked suddenly swinging open. They sat like that for a long moment, hands clasped across the checkered tablecloth, both of them terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Small steps, she agreed quietly. Small steps, he echoed. They finished dinner talking about safer things, her love of old movies, his unexpected talent for piano, the places they'd traveled, the places they still wanted to see. Gerald insisted on paying despite her protests, and they walked back to the hospital parking lot together, the autumn air crisp against their faces. When do you come back to work? Gerald asked as they reached her car. Next week. Monday morning. I'm glad. The hospital isn't the same without you. He hesitated, then added, I'm not the same without you around. Katherine's breath caught. Before she could overthink it, she stood on her toes and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. Good night, Gerald. She got in her car quickly, before she could see his reaction, before she could do something even more reckless like kiss him properly. As she drove away, she glanced in her rearview mirror and saw him standing in the parking lot, one hand touching the spot where her lips had been, looking stunned. Katherine smiled despite herself. Maybe small steps were exactly what they both needed. Katherine's return to work should have been smooth. Dr. Reeves had cleared her. The new scheduling system ensured she couldn't work more than 3 doubles per month, and she felt genuinely rested for the first time in years. But she'd forgotten about hospital politics. She'd been back exactly 3 hours when Dr. Selena Park cornered her in the supply room. Katherine, do you have a moment? Selena's voice was pleasant, but her eyes were calculating. Of course, Dr. Park. What can I help you with? Selena closed the door behind them, her smile never wavering. I wanted to check in on you. Your collapse was quite dramatic. Everyone was so worried. I'm fully recovered. Thank you. That's wonderful. And Gerald was so attentive during your recovery. It was sweet, really, how concerned he was. Selena examined her perfectly manicured nails. Of course, Gerald has always had a soft spot for causes. Wounded birds, you might say. It's admirable. Katherine's spine straightened. I'm sorry, what are you implying? Oh, nothing negative. I just think it's important you understand the situation clearly. Gerald is grieving. He's vulnerable. And sometimes men in his position latch onto inappropriate attachments as a way of avoiding their real feelings. Selena's eyes sharpened. I'd hate to see you hurt when he realizes you were just a distraction from his grief. The words hit their target with surgical precision. Every insecurity Katherine had been suppressing roared to life. Was that all she was? A distraction? A project for a bored billionaire who needed something to fix? I appreciate your concern, Katherine managed, keeping her voice level despite the turmoil inside. But there's nothing inappropriate about my relationship with Mr. Hastings. He's been supportive, as any good board chairman should be. Of course. Selena moved toward the door, then paused. Just one more thing. You should know that Gerald and I have been growing quite close lately. We've been having lunch regularly, and his mother has been very encouraging. Margaret Hastings has very specific ideas about who would be suitable for her son, and well, let's just say our backgrounds are compatible in ways that make things easier. I wouldn't want you to misread Gerald's kindness as something more than it is. It would be awkward for everyone. After Selena left, Katherine stood in the supply room, her hands shaking. She told herself Selena was just jealous, just marking territory. But the seeds of doubt had been planted. Gerald lived in a penthouse. She lived in a studio in Queens. He attended galas with Manhattan's elite. She worked double shifts to afford groceries. His mother probably expected him to marry someone like Selena, educated, sophisticated, from the right family. What was Katherine thinking? That she could somehow fit into his world? That this fragile thing between them could survive the weight of their differences? She spent the rest of her shift distracted, her usual warmth with patience feeling forced. By the time her shift ended, she'd half convinced herself that pulling back from Gerald was the smart thing to do. The kind thing to do, even. He deserved someone who could stand beside him in his world without feeling like an imposter. She was heading to her car when she saw him. Gerald stood by his black Mercedes, clearly waiting. When he spotted her, his face transformed with a smile that made her heart ache. "Hi," he said, walking toward her. "I was hoping to catch you. How was your first day back?" Katherine forced herself to sound casual. "Fine. Busy. You know how it is." He frowned slightly. "You okay? You seem off." "Just tired. Long day. Too long." "Because if the new scheduling isn't working." "The scheduling is fine, Gerald. Everything's fine." She unlocked her car door, needing to escape before her resolve crumbled. "I should get home. I have things to take care of." "Katherine." He caught her hand gently. "Talk to me. What's wrong?" She looked at their joined hands, at the contrast of his expensive watch against her bare wrist, and something inside her cracked. "What are we doing?" "What do you mean?" "This. Us. Whatever this is. What's the endgame here, Gerald? Because I'm trying to figure it out, and I can't see how this works. You're you, and I'm me, and those are two completely different worlds." Understanding and pain crossed his face. "Someone said something to you. Who was it?" "It doesn't matter." "It does matter." "Was it Selena?" Katherine's silence was answer enough. Gerald's jaw clenched. "What did she say?" "Just the truth. That you're grieving and vulnerable. That I'm probably just a distraction. That your mother would never approve of someone like me. That you have lunch with her regularly, and she's more suitable for your life." Katherine pulled her hand away. "And she's right, isn't she? Be honest. What happens when you get tired of slumming it with the working-class nurse? When the novelty wears off, and you realize I'll never fit into your world?" "Slumming it." Gerald's voice rose, anger sparking in his eyes. "Is that what you think this is?" "I don't know what to think. You're a billionaire, Gerald. I work 3 jobs to survive. You attend charity galas. I clip coupons. Your mother probably has a list of acceptable daughters-in-law, and I guarantee I'm not on it. So yes, maybe Selena is right. Maybe I'm just a project to you. Something to make you feel good about yourself while you avoid dealing with your real life. That's not fair, isn't it? Tell me, have you mentioned me to your mother? Does she know you're spending time with one of the hospital nurses? Or are you keeping me separate, compartmentalized, because deep down you know I don't fit?" Gerald stared at her, his jaw working as he clearly fought for control. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "My mother doesn't get a vote in my life anymore. She lost that privilege when she spent 5 years trying to control my grief, to mold me back into the son she wanted rather than accepting the man I became. As for Selena, yes, I have lunch with her occasionally because she's persistent and it's easier than fighting. But I've never encouraged her, never given her reason to believe there's anything between us except professional courtesy. But you haven't discouraged her either, have you?" "I have, actually. Multiple times. She doesn't listen." He stepped closer, his eyes intense. "But let's talk about the real issue here. You're scared. I get it. I'm scared too. This thing between us is terrifying because it matters. Because it's real. And yes, our lives are different. Yes, there will be challenges. But Katherine, I'm not looking for someone who fits my world. I'm looking for someone who makes me want to build a new world. You do that. You make me want to be better, to feel more, to risk again. That's not a distraction. That's not a project. He stopped, swallowing hard. That's starting to feel like hope." Katherine felt tears burn her eyes. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be what you need. You already are. Just by being yourself. Just by caring enough to be scared." He reached for her hand again, more tentatively this time. "Don't let Selena's jealousy poison what we're building. Don't let fear make decisions for you. I'm asking for a chance. Just a chance to see where this goes." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe so badly. But the voices of doubt whispered loudly, what if he was wrong? What if they tried and failed, and she ended up heartbroken and unemployed? What if loving him meant losing everything she'd worked for? "I need time," she said finally. "To think. To process. This is all happening so fast, and I need time." Disappointment flickered across Gerald's face, but he nodded. "Okay, take the time you need. But Katherine, one thing before you go. That night you collapsed and I carried you, I was terrified. More terrified than I'd been since Claire died. Because in that moment, I realized I couldn't bear the thought of losing you, and I barely knew you. That should have sent me running. Instead, it made me want to know everything about you. That's not nothing. What we have, it's not nothing." He walked back to his car without waiting for a response, leaving Katherine standing in the parking lot with her heart in pieces and no idea how to put it back together. For 3 days, Katherine avoided Gerald. It wasn't difficult. She knew his schedule, knew when he typically visited the hospital, and made sure she was nowhere near those areas during those times. She threw herself into work, caring for patients with the intensity that had always defined her, trying to drown out the constant replaying of their parking lot conversation. She also couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said, that she made him feel hope, that he wanted to build a new world with her, that she was already everything he needed. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. On the fourth day, Katherine arrived at work to find an envelope taped to her locker. Inside was a note in elegant handwriting. "Katherine, I'm not going to push. You asked for time and I'll respect that. But I want you to have this." It belonged to Claire. She would have liked you, I think. She always believed in taking risks for the things that matter. "Whatever you decide, know that you've already given me something precious. You reminded me what it feels like to be alive." Gerald. Wrapped in tissue paper was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny compass. Katherine held it up to the light, tears streaming down her face. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. A compass to find her way. A reminder that sometimes the right direction wasn't the safe one. She was still staring at it when Martha from scheduling rushed over, her expression frantic. "Katherine, thank God. We have a situation. Mrs. Chun, she's coding. They're trying to stabilize her, but she keeps asking for you. Can you?" Katherine didn't wait for the rest. She sprinted to the ICU, the bracelet clutched in her fist. Mrs. Chin's room was organized chaos, doctors shouting orders, nurses administering medications, monitors beeping frantically. Katherine pushed through to the bedside, taking the elderly woman's hand. "I'm here, Mrs. Chun. I'm right here." Mrs. Chin's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and terrified. "Katherine, I'm here. You're going to be okay. The doctors are taking care of you. My grandson's wedding. Well, you're going to dance at that wedding if I have to waltz you around that reception hall myself. But you have to fight, Mrs. Chun. You have to keep fighting." The older woman squeezed her hand weakly. "Scared. I know. Me too. But some things are worth being scared for. Your family is worth it. Love is worth it." Katherine's voice cracked. "The things that matter most are always the scariest. That's how we know they matter." She was talking to Mrs. Chun, but she was also talking to herself. The medical team stabilized Mrs. Chun after 20 agonizing minutes. Katherine stayed until the woman fell into exhausted sleep, then walked out of the ICU on shaking legs. She made it to the stairwell before collapsing onto the steps, her whole body trembling with adrenaline and revelation. She'd meant every word she'd said to Mrs. Chun. Love was scary. Risk was terrifying. But that's how you knew something mattered. And what she felt for Gerald mattered. It mattered more than her fear, more than their different backgrounds, more than Selena's poison or Margaret Hastings' potential disapproval. Katherine looked down at the compass bracelet still clutched in her hand. Claire had taken a risk on Gerald once, had chosen love despite whatever obstacles they'd faced, and she'd left him this compass, a symbol of finding your way home. Maybe it was time Katherine found her way home too. She pulled out her phone and typed a message before she could overthink it. Asterisk, I was wrong. Can we talk? Asterisk. The response came within seconds. I'll be at the hospital in 20 minutes. Katherine went to the chapel to wait, the same chapel where she'd once seen Gerald sitting alone in grief. When he arrived, slightly breathless like he'd run from wherever he'd been, she stood. I'm sorry, she said before he could speak. I let fear make decisions for me. I let someone else's jealousy convince me that what we have isn't real. But Gerald, it is real. It's the most real thing I've felt in years, and that terrifies me. But I'm done running from things just because they're scary. Gerald crossed the space between them in 3 strides. Are you sure? Because Katherine, if we do this, I'm all in. I don't do halfway. I tried that with grief, and it nearly destroyed me. If we're doing this, we're really doing this. And yes, it will be hard. My mother will be difficult. There will be people like Selena who question us. Your schedule and my schedule will make coordinating time challenging. But I want to try. I want to try with everything I have. So do I. She held up the bracelet. Help me put this on. His hands shook slightly as he fastened the clasp around her wrist. Then he cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. I'm going to kiss you now, he whispered. If that's okay. That's extremely okay. Gerald kissed her gently, reverently, like she was precious and breakable and worth savoring. Katherine's hands fisted in his shirt. pulling him closer, kissing him back with all the pent-up longing and fear and hope she'd been carrying. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gerald rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling in love with you," he admitted. "I tried not to. I try to keep distance. But Katherine, you're impossible not to love." "Good," she whispered back. "Because I'm falling in love with you too, and if I'm going to be terrified, I'd prefer we be terrified together." He laughed, the sound full of joy and relief, and kissed her again. Neither of them noticed Selena standing in the chapel doorway, her expression twisted with fury, her phone in her hand, taking pictures. Neither of them knew that the real battle was just beginning. The photos appeared online within hours. Gerald and Katherine kissing in the hospital chapel, his hands in her hair, her body pressed against his. The accompanying article was a masterpiece of insinuation without outright accusation, questioning whether the Billionaire board chairman was showing favoritism to a particular nurse, whether his judgment had been compromised by an inappropriate relationship, whether hospital policies were being violated. Katherine saw it first when a coworker showed her the gossip site on their phone. Her stomach dropped as she read the caption. Billionaire board chairman Gerald Hastings caught in steamy hospital romance. Conflict of interest or true love? "Oh God," she breathed. The story spread like wildfire. By the end of her shift, Katherine had been called into a meeting with hospital administration. Gerald was already there, his expression carved from stone. "Ms. Kazoba," the hospital's legal counsel began. "We need to discuss the nature of your relationship with Mr. Hastings and whether any hospital policies have been violated." "I'll make this simple," Gerald interrupted, his voice cold and commanding. "Katherine and I are in a relationship. It began after her medical leave, during which time I was not involved in any supervisory capacity over her care or scheduling. Our relationship has not affected her work performance, has not resulted in any preferential treatment, and has violated precisely 0 hospital policies. Furthermore, I'm prepared to recuse myself from any and all board decisions that might directly impact Katherine's employment. Is that clear enough?" The legal counsel shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Hastings, we're not suggesting anything inappropriate. We simply need to ensure that the hospital isn't liable. Fine. Draw up whatever documentation you need. Katherine and I will sign it. But I will not sit here and defend a relationship between 2 consenting adults as if we've committed some crime." He stood, offering Katherine his hand. "Come on. We're leaving." Katherine took his hand, but as they walked out, she felt the stares from everyone they passed. The whispers. The judgment. This was exactly what she'd feared, becoming the subject of gossip, having her professionalism questioned, being seen as the nurse who slept her way to the chairman's attention. Outside the administration building, she pulled her hand from Gerald's. "This is going to get worse before it gets better," she said quietly. "I know. Your mother is going to find out. If she hasn't already. I know. People are going to say terrible things about me. About us. I know." He turned her to face him. "Katherine, look at me. I don't care what people say. I don't care about gossip or photos or insinuations. The only thing I care about is whether you can handle this. Because if it's too much, if you want to step back until things calm down, I'll understand. I won't like it, but I'll understand." Katherine thought about it. About the easy path, breaking things off with Gerald, avoiding the scandal, protecting her reputation. About going back to her safe, controlled, exhausting life where she never risked anything and never gained anything either. Then she thought about Mrs. Chun, fighting for one more dance at her grandson's wedding. About taking risks for the things that mattered. About the way Gerald looked at her, like she was his compass home. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not stepping back. But Gerald, we need to be smart about this. We need to be prepared for whatever comes next." "Agreed. Which means you should probably meet my mother sooner rather than later." Katherine's eyes widened. "You're serious?" "Completely. If Margaret Hastings is going to be a problem, and trust me, she will be, I'd rather face it head on. She's hosting a charity dinner this Saturday. Black tie, Manhattan's elite. Exactly the kind of event she uses to parade eligible women in front of me. I want you there. I want her to meet you and realize that I've already made my choice. Gerald, I don't have anything appropriate to wear to something like that. I don't even know which fork to use at fancy dinners." He smiled. "You use them from the outside in. And I'll have something delivered to your apartment. Please, Katherine. I need you there. I need her to see what I see when I look at you." So that's how Katherine found herself standing in her tiny studio apartment on Saturday evening, staring at a delivered box containing the most beautiful dress she'd ever seen. Midnight blue silk that felt like water against her skin, with a price tag she'd immediately hidden in the trash because knowing how much it cost would have made wearing it impossible. Gerald picked her up in his Mercedes, and when she opened the door, his expression made every ounce of nervousness worth it. "You're stunning," he breathed. "I'm terrified." "That too. Come on, let's go face the dragon together." Margaret Hastings' penthouse was exactly what Katherine expected, obscenely large, decorated with art that probably cost more than Katherine would make in a lifetime, filled with people dripping in diamonds and privilege. Katherine felt every eye turn toward them when they entered, felt the weight of assessment and judgment. Margaret herself approached within minutes, a tall, elegant woman with Gerald's eyes and an expression that could freeze lava. "Gerald, darling, I'm so glad you could make it." Her gaze slid to Katherine, cool and dismissive. "And you've brought a guest." "Mother, this is Katherine Kazoba." "Katherine, my mother, Margaret Hastings." Katherine extended her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Hastings." Margaret looked at the offered hand like it might be contaminated before briefly shaking it. "How interesting. Gerald, might I speak with you privately?" "No. Anything you need to say can be said in front of Katherine." Margaret's smile turned sharp. "Very well. I've seen the photos, Gerald. The entire city has seen the photos. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? How inappropriate? There's nothing inappropriate about it. You're dating an employee, a nurse. Good heavens, Gerald, I raised you better than this." Katherine felt her face heat, but before she could respond, Gerald stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "Careful, mother. You're talking about the woman I love. The woman who reminds me what kindness looks like, what compassion means, what it feels like to hope again. So yes, she's a nurse. She's also brilliant, caring, and stronger than anyone in this room. And if you can't see that, if you're so blinded by your snobbery that you can't recognize quality when it's standing in front of you, that's your loss. But you will speak to her with respect, or you and I are done. Permanently." Silence rippled outward from their conversation. Katherine realized people were listening, watching this family drama unfold like some reality show. Margaret's face went white, then red. "You would choose her over your family?" "In a heartbeat. Because she's taught me something you never did. That family isn't about blood or social standing. It's about who shows up when you're broken, who sees you at your worst, and stays anyway. Katherine has been more family to me in 2 months than you've been in 5 years. If you've been captivated by Katherine and Gerald's story, make sure you like this video and subscribe, because things are about to get even more intense, and you won't want to miss what happens next." Margaret turned on her heel and walked away, her spine rigid with fury. Gerald turned to Katherine, his expression softening. "I'm sorry. That was awful. That was the most romantic thing anyone's ever done for me," Katherine whispered, tears threatening. "But Gerald, you just destroyed your relationship with your mother. I damaged an already broken relationship. She made her choice years ago when she prioritized appearances over my grief. I'm just done pretending it doesn't matter." He took her hand. "Come on, let's get out of here." They left the party, ignoring the whispers and stares, and ended up at the same Italian restaurant where they'd had their first real date. Over pasta and wine, Katherine finally asked the question that had been haunting her. "What did Claire see in you?" Gerald looked surprised. "What? You talk about her like she was perfect. Like you didn't deserve her. But Gerald, she chose you. What do you think she saw?" He was quiet for a long moment. "She used to say I was kinder than I let people see. That I built walls to protect myself, but underneath I was soft. She made it her mission to prove I was worth more than I believed." His eyes met Katherine's. "You do the same thing. You see through the walls. You make me want to be the man you think I am." "I don't think you're that man, Gerald. You are that man. You just forgot for a while." They talked until the restaurant closed, until the waitstaff was pointedly cleaning around them. Then Gerald drove her home, walking her to her door like a gentleman from another era. "Thank you," Katherine said at her doorstep. "For tonight. For defending me. For choosing me over your mother. I know that wasn't easy. Easiest decision I've ever made." He kissed her softly. "Get some sleep. I'll see you tomorrow." "Tomorrow," she agreed. But tomorrow brought new problems. Katherine arrived at work to find her locker vandalized. Someone had taped crude notes about sleeping her way to the top, about being a gold digger, about using her body to get ahead. Her hands shook as she tore them down, tears of anger and humiliation burning her eyes. Don't let them get to you. She turned to find Martha watching sympathetically. Who did this? I don't know. But Katherine, people are talking. Not everyone means it badly. Some folks are actually rooting for you too. But there's a group, led by Dr. Park, that's making your life their mission. Why? What did I ever do to Selena? You committed the ultimate sin. You got the one thing she wanted. Gerald's attention, his affection, his love. She's been pursuing him for 2 years. She thought eventually he'd give in. Katherine cleaned out her locker, her jaw set. She wasn't going to let bullies run her off. She'd faced worse challenges than jealous colleagues. She'd survived poverty, immigration, crushing debt, and soul-destroying exhaustion. She could survive some nasty notes. But the harassment escalated. Over the next week, Katherine found her patient assignments changed to the most difficult cases, found her break requests denied, found herself excluded from team meetings and social gatherings. Someone started a rumor that she'd falsified her nursing credentials. Another rumor claimed she was pregnant and trying to trap Gerald into marriage. Through it all, Gerald stood by her. He had flowers delivered to the hospital daily. He showed up to walk her to her car every evening. He made sure everyone knew they were together, and he had no intention of hiding it. But Katherine could see it wearing on both of them. The constant scrutiny, the relentless gossip, the way every interaction was analyzed and dissected. She started having panic attacks again, started losing weight again, started wondering if love was supposed to feel this hard. One particularly brutal night, after a patient's family member had sneered at her and asked if she was the chairman's whore, Katherine broke down in the supply closet. She was still crying when Gerald found her. Apparently someone had texted him that she was upset. He held her while she sobbed, not offering empty platitudes, just solid presence and warmth. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, she admitted against his chest. Every day it gets harder. Every day there's new cruelty, new rumors, new ways people find to make me feel small. I love you, Gerald, but I don't know if love is enough. What would be enough? He asked quietly. I don't know. A world where we can just be together without it being everyone's business. Without it costing us so much. Gerald was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled back, his eyes intense. Okay. Okay, what? Okay, let's make that world. I'll step down from the board. Katherine's eyes widened. What? No. Gerald, you can't. I can and I will. If the problem is the power imbalance, the conflict of interest, people thinking you're getting special treatment because of me, then I'll remove myself from the equation. I'll step down, appoint someone else as chairman, and find other ways to be useful. But you love that position. You love being able to help the hospital. I love you more. He cupped her face in his hands. Katherine, I've spent 5 years existing in a half-life, going through motions, achieving things that meant nothing because I had no one to share them with. You brought me back to life. You made me remember what it feels like to care about something, someone, more than success or appearances or what people think. I'm not losing that. I'm not losing you. So yes, I'll step down. I'll change whatever needs to be changed. I'll fight whatever needs to be fought. Just please don't give up on us. Katherine kissed him then, pouring every ounce of love and fear and gratitude into it. When they finally broke apart, she whispered, I'm not giving up. I promise. But Gerald, you're not stepping down either. We're going to face this together, and we're going to win. Because that's what people who love each other do. They fight for each other and for the life they want. Together, he agreed. Together. They sealed it with another kiss, neither knowing that outside the supply closet, someone was once again taking photos, documenting their private moment for public consumption. The war for their love was far from over. But for the first time, both Katherine and Gerald believed they might actually win it. 3 months later, Katherine stood in Mrs. Chin's grandson's wedding reception, watching the elderly woman dance with her grandson, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. The surgery had been successful. The recovery had been long and difficult. But Mrs. Chun had made it, just like Katherine promised. See, Gerald said softly beside her. Some things are worth fighting for. Katherine leaned into him, marveling at how natural it felt now, being by his side. The past 3 months had been brutal. Gerald had indeed stepped down as board chairman despite her protests, wanting to eliminate any appearance of impropriety. Margaret Hastings had publicly disowned her son, making their estrangement social news. Selena had continued her campaign of harassment until Gerald had finally filed a formal complaint that resulted in her transfer to another hospital. But they'd survived it. More than survived, they'd thrived. Gerald had used his free time to establish a scholarship fund for nurses pursuing advanced degrees, with Katherine as the first recipient. She was enrolled in a part-time medical school program starting in the fall, her dream of becoming a doctor finally within reach. They'd found a rhythm. Dinners twice a week, Sundays spent in lazy comfort, stolen moments between shifts and meetings. And Katherine had discovered something miraculous. Being loved by Gerald Hastings meant being seen, truly seen, in all her messy, complicated, beautiful humanity. He didn't need her to be perfect. He just needed her to be herself. "Dance with me," Gerald said, offering his hand. Katherine took it, letting him lead her onto the dance floor. As they swayed together, she caught Mrs. Chen's eye. The older woman smiled, nodding approvingly. "I have something for you," Gerald murmured in her ear. "Yeah? What's that?" Instead of answering, he stopped dancing. Then, to Katherine's shock and the surprise of everyone around them, he dropped to one knee. "Gerald," she breathed. "What are you doing?" "Something I should have done months ago." He pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a stunning ring, simple, elegant, perfect. "Katherine Kazoba, you saved my heart when I didn't even know it needed saving. You taught me that love isn't something to fear, it's something to fight for. You showed me that the best life isn't the safe one or the easy one. It's the one you build with someone who makes you want to be braver, kinder, better. I know we haven't been together that long. I know there will be more challenges. But I also know that I want to face all of them with you. Will you marry me?" Katherine looked down at him. This man who'd carried her when she fell, who'd fought for her when others tried to tear her down, who'd chosen her over wealth and status, and his own mother's approval. This man who'd given her time, support, and love without asking for anything in return except the chance to be by her side. The answer was obvious. It had always been obvious, from the moment he'd caught her mid-collapse and refused to let go. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Gerald slid the ring onto her finger, then stood and kissed her to the sound of applause and cheers from the wedding guests. Mrs. Chun was crying happy tears, and even the stoic wedding photographer looked misty-eyed. "I love you," Gerald whispered against her lips. "I love you too," Katherine whispered back. "Always." They danced the rest of the evening, surrounded by joy and love, and the hard-won knowledge that sometimes the best things in life were the ones you had to fight for. Sometimes the greatest love stories weren't the easy ones. They were the ones built from struggle and choice and the courage to risk your heart one more time. As the night wound down and Gerald drove Katherine home, her hand in his, the compass bracelet catching the streetlights, Katherine realized something profound. She'd come to America dreaming of saving enough money to help her family, to become a doctor, to make something of herself. She'd never imagined she might also save someone's heart along the way, or that someone might save hers in return. "What are you thinking about?" Gerald asked. "Happy endings," Katherine said, "and new beginnings. And how sometimes they're the same thing." Gerald lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "Here's to our beginning." "Our beginning," Katherine agreed. And for once, the future didn't feel terrifying. It felt like possibility. It felt like hope. It felt, Katherine thought with a smile, like coming home. 6 months later, the first thing Katherine noticed when she walked into the hospital on her final day before transitioning to medical school full-time was the banner. Huge, colorful, hung across the cardiac ward entrance. "Thank you, Katherine. We'll miss you." She stopped in her tracks, her throat tightening. Her colleagues streamed out from behind the nurse's station, all wearing matching t-shirts that read, "Team Katherine," with a tiny compass symbol on the chest. Martha led the charge, pulling Katherine into a fierce hug. "Did you think we'd let you leave without a proper goodbye?" Martha said, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "You guys," Katherine managed, her voice breaking. "This is too much." "It's not enough," one of the younger nurses said. "You changed everything here. The new scheduling policies, the wellness programs, the scholarship fund. Katherine, you made this place better just by being yourself." They'd arranged a small celebration in the break room. Cake, coffee, and heartfelt speeches that had Katherine crying and laughing in equal measure. Even Dr. Morrison stopped by to shake her hand, and tell her she'd make an exceptional doctor. You have the thing that can't be taught, he said. You genuinely care. Don't lose that in medical school. The world needs doctors with your heart. I won't, Katherine promised. I learned from the best. She spent her shift saying goodbye to longtime patients, some of whom cried when they heard she was leaving nursing to pursue medicine. Mrs. Chun, who'd become a regular visitor to the cardiac ward for checkups, brought her an elaborate gift basket. You told me to fight for one more dance, the elderly woman said. Because of you, I've had 6 months of dances with my family. Now you go fight for your dreams. Make us proud, Dr. Katherine. I'm not a doctor yet, Mrs. Chun. You will be. And when you are, I'll be first in line to say I told you so. As her shift ended and Katherine cleaned out her locker for the final time, she felt Gerald's presence before she saw him. She turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, watching her with that expression that still made her heart skip, love mixed with pride, and something deeper, something that promised forever. Ready to go home, future Dr. Gerald Hastings? He asked. Katherine smiled at the hyphenated name. They'd married 3 months ago in a small ceremony at the hospital chapel where they'd first kissed, with only close friends present. Margaret Hastings hadn't attended, though she'd sent a stiff congratulations card that Gerald had immediately thrown away. They hadn't heard from her since, and Gerald seemed lighter for the distance. Almost ready. One more thing. Katherine walked through the cardiac ward one last time, trailing her fingers along the walls, remembering the desperate nights, the impossible shifts, the moments of grace when a patient pulled through against the odds. This place had nearly destroyed her, but it had also led her to Gerald, to her dreams, to becoming the woman she was meant to be. At the end of the hallway, she stopped at the bulletin board where staff posted inspirational quotes and photos. Someone had added a new one. A picture of Katherine from her first day at the hospital, looking young and terrified and hopeful, next to a recent photo of her at their wedding, radiant and confident in Gerald's arms. Below it, someone had written, "From surviving to thriving. Proof that the best stories have the hardest beginnings." That's beautiful, Gerald said softly behind her. It's true, Katherine replied. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. The compass bracelet, Claire's bracelet, now hers, caught the light. Ready to go home? Always. But first, he pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. This arrived today. I wanted to wait until your last shift to show you. Katherine opened it, her hands shaking. Inside was a letter on official letterhead from Nigeria. Her eyes scanned the words, then widened in shock. Gerald, this says my brother got accepted to MIT. Full scholarship. How is that possible? The scholarship fund I established wasn't just for American nurses, Gerald said carefully. I might have extended it to include family members of healthcare workers who've shown exceptional academic promise. Your brother's engineering application was outstanding. He earned this on his own merit, Katherine. I just made sure he had the opportunity to be seen. Katherine threw her arms around his neck, crying happy tears into his shoulder. Thank you. God, thank you. He's going to be so. My mother is going to. She pulled back, laughing through her tears. You didn't have to do this. Yes, I did. Your family's dreams matter because they matter to you. And everything that matters to you matters to me. He kissed her forehead. Besides, I have selfish motivations. When your brother becomes a brilliant engineer and your sisters finish their degrees, I want them to visit us. I want to know the people who made you who you are. I want them to see that the sacrifices you made weren't for nothing. I love you, Katherine whispered. So much it scares me sometimes. Good. I'd be worried if you weren't a little scared. It means you understand how precious this is. He took her hand again. Come on. We have dinner reservations, and I have more surprises. More? I don't think my heart can handle more. You'll like this one. I promise. The car ride took them not to a restaurant, but to a beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn. Katherine looked at Gerald questioningly as he helped her out of the car. What are we doing here? You'll see. He led her up the steps and unlocked the door, revealing a gorgeously renovated interior, exposed brick, modern kitchen, sunlight streaming through large windows. Katherine walked through slowly, taking in the home office already set up with medical textbooks, the cozy living room with shelves clearly meant for more books, the master bedroom with a view of a small garden. Gerald, whose house is this? Ours. If you want it. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. I know you love our penthouse, But I also know you've mentioned wanting something that feels more like home. Something with character and history and room to grow. I've been looking for months, and when this place came on the market, I knew. It's close to your medical school. There's a guest room for when your family visits. And that garden, I thought maybe we could plant something together. Literal roots to go with our metaphorical ones. Katherine turned in his arms, overwhelmed. You bought us a house. I made an offer on a house pending your approval. If you hate it, we'll keep looking. But Katherine, I want us to have a home. Not just a place we sleep, but a place we build our life together. Where we'll have family dinners and arguments and lazy Sunday mornings. Where maybe, someday, we'll have kids running through these rooms. I want all of that with you. Kids. Katherine's voice caught. They'd talked about the future in abstract terms, but hearing Gerald say it so plainly, so hopefully, made it real. If you want them. I know medical school is your priority right now, and I support that completely. But someday, when you're ready, I'd love to have children with you. Little humans who have your compassion and my terrible sense of humor. Who we can teach that love is worth fighting for and family is what you choose, not just who you're born to. Katherine kissed him then, pouring every ounce of love and hope and gratitude into it. Yes, she said when they finally broke apart. Yes to the house. Yes to the someday children. Yes to building this life with you. Yes to all of it. Gerald smiled, that rare, brilliant smile that transformed his whole face. Then welcome home, Dr. Kazoba Hastings. I'm not a doctor yet, she reminded him, laughing. You will be. And I'll be there for every exam, every late-night study session, every moment of doubt and triumph. Because that's what we do. We show up for each other. Always. Always, Katherine agreed. They spent the evening exploring their new home, making plans for furniture and paint colors, and which room would be Katherine's study space. They ordered takeout and ate it sitting on the floor of their empty living room, talking about everything and nothing, just being together. As the sun set and painted their new home in shades of gold and orange, Katherine leaned against Gerald's shoulder and thought about the journey that had brought them here. From the night she'd collapsed in the hospital hallway to this moment, sitting in their own home with a ring on her finger and medical school starting in 2 weeks, and a future that stretched out bright with possibility. She thought about the girl she'd been when she first came to America, scared, alone, carrying the weight of her family's hopes on her shoulders. She thought about the woman she'd become, still scared sometimes, but no longer alone, still carrying responsibilities, but now sharing the weight with someone who loved her enough to help. What are you thinking about? Gerald asked, as he so often did. How far I've come, Katherine said. How many times I almost gave up. How many moments I was sure I couldn't survive. And then I collapsed, and you caught me, and everything changed. You would have been fine without me, Gerald said. You're one of the strongest people I know. Maybe, but I wouldn't have been happy. I wouldn't have known that strong doesn't mean doing everything alone. That asking for help isn't weakness. That letting someone love you is just as brave as anything else. She turned to look at him. You saved my heart too, you know. I just didn't realize it was breaking under all that weight until you offered to help carry it. Gerald kissed her temple. Then I guess we saved each other. Best rescue mission ever. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, neither in a hurry to move, both savoring this perfect moment. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with evening life, neighbors coming home, children playing their last games before bedtime, the city settling into its nighttime rhythm. Inside, Katherine and Gerald held each other close, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and chosen to build something beautiful from their brokenness. Katherine's phone buzzed with a text from her mother, responding to the news about her brother's scholarship. The message was in Igbo, but the emotion translated perfectly. God has blessed us through you, my daughter. Your father would be so proud. Fresh tears welled up. Gerald held her tighter. Happy tears, he asked. The happiest, Katherine confirmed. For the first time since my father died, I feel like I can breathe. Like the weight doesn't have to crush me. Like maybe I've done enough. You've done more than enough. You've done miracles. We've done miracles, Katherine corrected. Together. Together, Gerald agreed. And there, in their new home, wrapped in each other's arms, Katherine Kazoba Hastings felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Peace. Not the absence of challenges or fears or uncertainty, but the deep-seated knowledge that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. She had Gerald. She had her dreams. She had a family that loved her and a future that excited her. She had learned that falling didn't mean failing, that being caught didn't mean being weak, that love wasn't a distraction from her goals, but the foundation that made achieving them possible. She had learned that sometimes the woman who saves everyone else needs saving too. And she had learned that the right person doesn't try to change you or fix you or complete you. They just help you become more fully yourself. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I love you too, Gerald whispered back. Forever. Forever, Katherine echoed. And she believed it. After everything they'd survived, after all the obstacles they'd overcome, after proving that love could bridge impossible divides, she believed in their forever. The woman who saved his heart had saved her own in the process. And that, Katherine thought with a smile as she drifted off to sleep in Gerald's arms in their new home, was the best happy ending of all. If Katherine and Gerald's journey touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Drop a comment below telling us what moment resonated most with you. Was it the chapel kiss, the wedding proposal, or the beautiful brownstone surprise? Share this video with someone who believes in second chances and loves that are worth fighting for. Because in a world that often feels too harsh, stories like Katherine and Gerald's remind us that compassion, courage, and love can still triumph. Thank you for watching, and remember, your own love story is worth fighting for too.